Here we do it.
And welcome everybody to another episode of the Planet Mullins podcast. I have an amazing guest with me today who has been a good friend and a studio mate. I guess that's what studio brother for years. We've just done all kinds of stuff. And his name is Phil Gates. He's a blues guitarist. Hey, Phil.
What's happening, Rob Mullins?
Hey, man. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at your bio and I had forgotten just exactly how cool you are because it's been a minute. But I'm going to read some of these things here because for the listening audience, Phil isn't just a great blues guitar player and singer, but he's a big supporter of the blues community, and he's a prolific NAMM show guy for years. He was always there hooking up people and trying to help folks out. Anyway, some of his session work includes sessions with Peebo Bryson, Regina Belle, Melville Moore, Freddie Jackson, Evelyn Champagne-King, Denise Williams, Jody Watley, Howard Hewitt, Teddy Pendergrass, Brian McKnight. God, I love him. Ruben Studdard and Maurice White. And then he's also something that I thought was really cool because this has been going on, I think, 5 or 6 years. You can correct me. He's also the vice president of music and media for the James Marshall Hendricks Foundation, which is jimmyhendrixfoundation.com, which is amazing. So he's put out a bunch of albums, and before we started recording, we were talking about the last project of Phil's that I was happy to play on. What was it called? The 12 Rhythms?
Yeah, the 12 Rhythms. That was my last, in fact. Yeah, before I moved to Europe. Yeah, so yeah, you played on a song called I Love the Way, and it starts out an odd meter thing, and then you brought it on home. It's great acoustic piano solo that was killing.
Thanks, man. Can you come up just a little closer to the mic and the camera so I can hear you a little better?
Okay.
I remember
1 2 1 2. There you go.
Oh, there you go. I remember it was funny because we did that session at a really famous blues studio, Big Surprise with Carmen Grillo. And I remember what Carmen said when he looked at that chart. He said, "This can't be the blues because it's got an odd time signature."
Yeah, I don't exactly fit the blues mode, all the time. But I love the blues. I come from the blues, but as I can be writing salsa tracks or film scores or a whole bunch of different things: blues, rock, funk, soul, R&B. So, but the blues thing has been a lot of fun, and that's actually what the point of that record was. It was the 12 different rhythms that I would like to do. You know how we'll do as artists, we'll do a record for a purpose. This is a live record I need. This is a radio record, and all the songs are about 3.5 minutes or 4 minutes long or something, It was a record I wanted to put out, and it was like, songs 8, 10, 11 minutes long. It's never going to get played on radio.
It was funny because the very first interaction that you and I had, which was just through me sending albums randomly to radio stations, you were playing one of my songs way back in the day, and it was like 9 minutes and something. And in those days, back in the 80s, we had entire stations. I remember in high school, there was one called KFML in Boulder, Colorado. When I went to high school in Colorado, I turned on KFML late at night, and I say, now we're going to listen to LA Woman by the Doors, the whole album. Go. So the guy would put on the first side, and the album would roll, but then it would get to the end of the side, and you just hear
click,
because he was outside smoking a joint, so all the rest of us are like, dude, virtually to the air, yo, come back in and turn over the freaking record. We want to hear side 2.
Come back to Earth.
Come on back to Earth.
Come back to Earth. We miss you here.
Yeah, we miss you here. Well, you've got so many accomplishments, and you played with so many people, but the thing that's happening really soon here is you're getting ready to go on tour to Europe, where you recently moved back from, right? Tell everybody about that.
That's correct. In 2016, I moved to Switzerland
Wow.
because for a couple of different reasons, but one of those reasons being I wanted to. We typically go over there during tour season and we'll play and we'll come back to the States and we'll play and we'll come back to the States. And I just wanted to play year round. So I went over there and was living in Switzerland, but would kind of Belgium and France and Greece and like that. And it was
Jumping
really
around.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's nice to. I have found that once you live in a place, after like the first 6 months, there is a little bit of like, okay, I can see him anytime. Whereas if you're only visiting a place once every 3 months, it's more kind of like, oh, the circus is in town, let's go see him. So
Well, that reminds me of something I saw in your bio that was pretty funny, because it says, amongst gigs that you've done, you did the Blues Music Awards Blind Raccoon Showcase.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, see, I would fly all the way to Holland just to see what a blind raccoon showcase does.
It's actually, yeah, that was a fun show. I've been really kind of fortunate to be able to work with a lot of people like yourself. And I have to tell your audience one thing is that Rob and I got to work together on a project in LA, but I had originally got hip to your music back when I was working, just doing sound at a jazz club in Texas called the Caravan of Dreams. And I had hit because I remember there was a song, was it Jesus, Mary, and Irving?
Jesus, Mary, and Irving, yeah, on the Red Shoes album. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was actually a fan of Rob's from the 80s. And then we got to, and Kirk would always, or Preston would kind of always go, oh yeah, Rob's on this session. I have no idea which Rob, he's talking about, and then I walk in and Rob goes, hi, I'm Rob Mullins. And I'm like, yes, you are.
I remember we had such good times at that place. It was Crossroads of the World, and the studio was called Private Island. And Preston had you and I on just a ton of stuff at that time, and it was Larry Antonino on bass and Craig Thomas on sax and vocals, and then one of the guys that played drums for Kenny G, and I couldn't remember that guy's name. You remember his name?
Yeah. No, I don't.
No.
But I remember we did one session with Ray Parker Jr. And that was kind of fun. That was a dual guitar thing. That was pretty hit.
Oh man, anyway,
so I went to Europe.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that was smug. So anyway, so I went to Europe, was playing. COVID happened, the world stopped, and so then I came back to the States, and I'm on the East Coast now, and I put together a band here. So I've got a East Coast band now and a West Coast band and a band in Europe. So it makes it easier for me to just travel. Right. And then the cats are in place, instead of flying a band.
Right.
But it's been really fun. So I've got a week coming up, March 13th through the 21st. I'm going to be in Holland for 4 shows and a TV show.
Wow.
Actually, yeah. So, yeah, that'll be kind of fun. And so if you want the information, go to philgates.com. All the information and dates are there on the tour page. But it's going to be a lot of fun. We always have a blast in Holland. They treat us from the audiences are great. Well, the audiences are great everywhere, but we really have fun in Holland, so I'm looking forward to that. That's going to
be incredible. Well, the blues thing, and I noticed this with jazz years ago, because many years ago there were guys that were ambassadors of genres, like Louis Armstrong was the ambassador of jazz worldwide for like years and years and years. And they tried to do that with Oscar Peterson, and he kept saying, I'm Canadian. So that didn't really work out, but a few other guys have done that. Wynton Marsalis took all of that over for a while. And as far as the blues go, you're one of those guys that's really kind of taking the genre all over the place. Now, some of these blues artists that you played with, are incredible. Buddy Guy, Stevie Ray Vaughn,
Oh, well,
Albert
I
King.
did sound for them. Yeah, I
Okay.
did sound for those guys. Yeah, I wish I could have played with those guys, but yeah, I have to be honest. And that's when I was working at the Caravan. I was doing
But what
sound
was it
and
like
tech for
meeting?
those
What
guys.
was it like hanging out with Buddy Guy? I
See,
mean, that's got to be amazing.
yeah, that was the cool thing about being the front of house guy is because I was, I had chops in sound, but you're there during sound check in a jazz club. You know how it is. It's just you and the engineer. The club is empty, and after sound check is done, it was just so cool to talk to these cats. It was great talking to Buddy Guy and hearing his thing about his take on the blues in that time frame of what it was like in the world versus when he came up. And I got to
Wow.
talk to Dizzie Gilespie a bunch of times, and Flora Parim and Eartha Kitt, and all the legends, so it was a lot
Man,
talking to those
Eartha
guys.
Kitt. I'm so jealous. You got to hang out with Eartha Kitt. I am so jealous.
I know, showing my age, but at the same
No,
time,
man, really, that's incredible. I'll tell you really quick. I only have one Dizzy Gillespie story. I'll make it really quick. So
okay.
this was back in the late 80s when Catalina Jazz Club in LA was on Cahuenga. It was the little version of the club
I remember.
before
Right.
they moved. And I went in there to hear Dizzy Gillespie. And I
Okay.
was with a Hungarian model who was my girlfriend. And we were sitting 2 tables back from the stage. Dizzy hasn't come out. And there's this couple in front of us. And the guy in front of us is an older dude. And he's got on the stupidest jacket I've ever seen. And this is one of those things that it's like a what do they call it, a patchwork or a quilt or something, where there's like,
Oh,
okay, here's a little triangle of red and white, and here's a little triangle of orange with blue dots on it, and there's another one, and he looks awful. It looked like a clown show. So as I'm having the Grand Marniers and going into the thing, I'm talking to my girl, trying to make her laugh and telling all these jokes about this goofy guy in front of me. And then Dizzy Gillespie walks out and he says, "Before I play a note, I have to acknowledge the most famous jazz critic in the world, sitting right here in the front in the stunning jacket, Mr. Leonard Feather." And I was like, oh my God.
right.
I've been making fun of like the most famous jazz book author and critic for the LA Times. And I sure hope he doesn't even recognize me, because I'm going to need him for the whole rest of my
You'll need
career.
him later.
Yeah.
Right.
But Dizzy was one of those guys. And now you're kind of the guy, as far as the blues goes, one of the major guys that goes around the world. Now, do you do workshops and clinics and talk? Are you going to talk on the TV show or just play?
This will be This will be a play show. This will be a play.
Okay.
I'll be playing about 4 songs off the last couple of records, and
Nice.
just kind of give a teaser for the tour. But I do still do some things since I moved back to the States, just trying to get that stuff more organized. But looking forward to doing more of that. But the thing about you were saying that I was taking the blues in different places, and
Right.
that was the reason I brought up the working with all the jazz cats, is that as a young kid, I was like I'm talking to them. I'm getting the honor of talking to the real guys, and they'd say, well, what are you trying to do, young man? And I'd say, well, I'm trying to be like you. I want to be an artist,
Right.
And almost all of them just said, just go be you, man. That's what I did, and they were, so when it came to blues, like I said, I hear other elements. And if you think of the original blues cats, there was, Delta blues, and there was, Mississippi blues, and then it moved to Chicago and became electrified and things like
Right.
that, so everybody was trying different things. You had jump blues, boogie woogie, things that were like real dance hall things. It wasn't all just like, da 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 da, so there was a whole array of it. So I just kind of like to bend those rules and kind of just present a whole palette of a blues envelope or a blues umbrella. I mean, I think the audiences tend to appreciate hearing something different.
Right. Well, I like that as an album title, The Blue Umbrella. That's like that would be really
actually kind of good. I might have to write that down.
The Blue Phil Gates and the Blue Umbrella. That's even a good band's name. You know,
Actually,
you could have like Robert Palmer girls come out with the umbrellas and those mini skirts and stuff. Now,
that's what I need.
we got so much ground to cover here. I'm just going to move right on to how did you become the vice president of the Jimi Hendrix Foundation, and what is that? What you have duties, and how did that all happen?
It's kind of been floating back and forth. It's been running. It's run by a gentleman out in L.A. And how it kind of came about was I was having a conversation about what would a foundation be like. Is it going to be a bunch of Hendrix sycophants, and it's like, here's how to be like Hendrix and everything like that, you know? And so what we wanted to do was kind of, you know, what Hendrix did and those guys of that time was find their voice. We kind of wanted to do a foundation that was helping people find their voice, regardless of instrument or genre, but just how to find where their path is. Because you know how it is. It's like, well, it isn't so much anymore, but when we came up, it was like, so what section of the record store do you want to be in? Right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
You couldn't do a jazz thing and then do a bebop thing and then do a rock thing. You know, it's like, no, you have to be an artist in one place. So, you know, you had to find your voice within that genre.
They were trying to fit you into like a section in an alphabet. I have to read you something really funny real quick before we go on. Speaking of the genre thing, I'm headed to my Facebook page here because I got a thing from a jazz historical thing called the Jazz Music Archive, and they put up a whole like Rob Mullins bio. So anyway, I put this on my Facebook, and it just made me laugh because of the way that they described it. So let me just read this to you real quick, and then we'll move on.
Mm-hmm.
Rob Mullins is a pop / art song / folk / fusion, hard bop, jazz related improv / composition, R&B, post bop, post fusion, contemporary music artist.
Now say that 5 times fast.
I know. And if I had a mic to drop, I'd drop the mic right there. And then what I said after that on my Facebook post is I said, I always wondered about that and what I actually was. So now I finally know.
Now you know.
You know, it's the whole genre thing is kind of nutty, but I think when it goes back to Hendrix, I remember being a little kid when he came out, and there was something so unique and so raw about him. But he combined just all the foundational stuff kind of inherently.
Yes.
Like he just had the blues in the beginning. It just was him. You know, he tapped into whatever that blues channel is out in the universe.
Right.
You know.
And I think also he was, if you listen to a lot of his melody lines and single guitar parts on his studio records, I think a lot of it, you can kind of hear them as almost as horn parts as well, because he did play with Little Richard and he played with all these other bands before he, you know, became Hendrix. And so I'm in work listening to arrangements and listening to, you know, different approaches to the same kind of thing. And then he took that and turned it on 10 and, you know, and really kind of combined a lot of fun things, you know. And I thought that was one of the things that I really liked was, if you listen to like the Woodstock stuff, of course, is the Star Spangled Banner. But after that, he starts playing this almost octavey kind of Wes Montgomery thing.
Right.
You know, and it's like, okay, here's a completely different color, you know, that you wouldn't think of Hendrix, you know, and so it just showed his depth. And so then that was kind of also what we were trying to do with the foundation, is just find your range and find to fit into a box. You can, you know, bring any kind of element into whatever you want, because as long as it's authentic.
Right. Well, the authenticity makes such a difference because, you know, I was discussing one of my previous podcasts with a guitar player friend of mine the other day, and it was with a drummer you probably know, Steve Stevens. And and I had Steve on about a week or so ago on the show, and we were talking about, education and stuff, and I listed three musicians that were iconic and really had found their voice into this amazing thing. It was a Keith Jarrett trio, and all three of the guys in Jarrett's band, Keith Jarrett, Gary Peacock, and Jack DeJohnette, were all Berkeley dropouts. Like
Okay,
none
right.
of them, none of them finished Berkeley. But the thing about it is that for some people, that kind of a structured 4-year program is great, and for other people like me, I didn't do well in college, but for there to be a foundation that's supporting individuals finding their voice and then basing it on a person that obviously in today's world, Jimmy would, if he were to do some of the things that he did and be some of the things that he was, like high a lot and drinking heavily and smashing things and saying crazy stuff, like it doesn't really fit 2023's description. But you can't deny that he was tapped in, and whatever his personality factors are or were, that was something that was just always acceptable. When you and I were younger coming up, it'd be like, I would go out on these tours and I would be following Les McCann. And so I would show up in like Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it was just splinters instead of a piano. Like Les was so hard on the instruments. I'd be like, well, I don't know. I'm going to play tonight. There's only 10 keys left, and all of those have beer on them.
He was the first cat I worked with at the jazz club. Was Les McCann. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He was definitely hard on a piano. Yeah.
I used to love Les McCann and Eddie Harris and that compared to what song? So So Hendrix he did a lot of stuff with a trio. Now your band that you're using over in Europe, is that a trio or a quintet, or tell me about your group?
No, it's a 4-piece. So I've got a guy named Uwe Rodi on keys. He's a great piano player, both acoustic and electric. I've got Tom Wagner on drums. He's super solid and a great organizer for us as well, because he's kind of like the music director. He pulls it all in together. Actually, all of them work together. And then Peter Swifer is on bass. So, and I like having keys because I could do the power trio thing, but I think it's nice to provide the audience with two different kinds of improv and two different kinds of guitar all the time.
Right.
And also, I'm not one of the guitar players that I aspire to that can carry a show like that, like some of the monster guitar players out there, like I'm a big fan of Mike Stern and Schofield and some of those guys as well,
Sure.
They can carry that, but even though with some of those guys, they'll have a keyboard player or somebody with them or something like that, or a horn player. And so I like having the keys on stage to be able to provide that element. So
sure.
It's not just some guitar player. Yeah. So, and it's fun, and these guys are awesome. We got together about 5 years ago, and it just stuck. And the bass player's new, but the other cats have been with me. And what's nice is that how it is with the band when you have cats that you hire as guns, right? And they show up and they kill the gig, and stuff like that, or you have friends that you want to work with and you do that show, and what ended up with this band is they were guns that became into friends.
Nice.
So it ended up being this really nice thing. Yeah. Because when they're guns, they're going to show's over. They're done and they're gone. It's like, okay.
I know. And it's a little bit different of a thing doing it the way you're doing, like, when I travel with Hubert Laws, we travel as the quintet. So we're having this basic, like, every night, every flight is an adventure. I remember sitting
Right.
next to Ralph Penland, rest in peace, Ralph, years ago on our first trip over to Russia, and we had 29 hours of flights to do. And he didn't, and we're next to each other. I'm on the aisle and he's in the middle seat, and he didn't say anything for 29 hours.
Wow.
But then once we got with Hubert and with Budway and with Leftwich, a lot of it is over the food. You have the meals, and you're telling your story about, okay, what was the flight from New York like? What was it like from LA? And you play the gig. Right. And then Hubert has always been very much community and band spirit oriented. So it turns into like a family on the road. Like, it's not quite like National Lampoon Vacation because everybody's older, but anyway, before we run out of time, I wanted to just tell you how great it is to see you and hear from you. I think the last gig that we did was right before you moved, and we were playing at Vibrato.
Right.
And it was a singers night that Preston Glass sponsored. And it was you and me and percussionist. I can't remember who the bass player was. And then it was one of those wacky sax guys that would only be in Hollywood. It wasn't Nick Mancini, it was Johnny Martini. And you're like, Johnny Martini, of course that's your real name. It's just like the weather guy, Stormy Rotman. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to end with just a really quick, before you do your social media plugs at the end, I'm going to end with just a quick summary of my conversation with, it was either Johnny or Jerry, maybe it's Jerry Martini. But anyway, he was the horn. He was way off to the side. I didn't even know he was on the gig, the whole gig, until the last two tunes. And then Preston pointed at him and he goes, he plays a solo and announces. So I walked over and said, man, your name sounds really familiar. And he goes, you're Rob Mullins, right? And I said, yeah. And he says, yeah, I know who you are. I've been hearing you on the radio all these years. How's it going? So we started talking, and I said, what's your main gig? And he says, Sly and the Family Stone. And I thought, wow, Sly and the Family Stone, because back in 87, Sly and I lived in the same rundown hotel on Rampart. It was called the Wilshire Royale Hotel. And I knew it was him because I was parking my Honda next to his Cadillac, and I was always getting hit and stuff by him because he couldn't park. So I said, man, it's been years since I heard about Sly. The Sly and the Family Stone is still going. He says, well, yeah, but it's not really Sly. And I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, Sly had a few issues, so we didn't want to lose the gig and lose all these fun tours. So we just found a guy that looks just like him and sings just like him. And then we go all over the world and nobody knows that it's not Sly.
No.
And I saved that story all these years, Phil, for just this interview with you.
And I appreciate it so much.
I knew you could appreciate it. So now your social media stuff, your website, Facebook, tell us all that before we run out of time here.
Right on. So the main site is just philgates.com, philgates.com.
Philgates.com, okay.
Right. And all of my social media is just Phil Gates Music. So Instagram, it's Phil Gates Music at Facebook, Phil Gates Music at Facebook.com. So all the social media is there. Please come check out. Please come friend or like or things like that, because I am interested in hearing from everybody and catching up with people I haven't chatted with in a while, like Rob, and I'm looking forward for you and I to do some more studio work together. That would be a blast, even across country. That would be super. How to get a hold of me? I'm still doing a lot of session work. We all have our home studio setups and everything like that. So,
well, your email's on your website, though, right?
Right. So
yeah, so that's a good way, folks, for you to reach out to Phil. I mean, he's done a lot of records. 12 Rhythms is the most recent one. And then when does your tour start exactly? Is that March 10?
March, it's actually, I fly on 13th. We start on the 14th. Yeah, so
Beautiful.
March 14th in Holland. Yeah, so and I'm working on record number 13 right now.
Wow.
So the 12 rhythms was, so this 13, that'll be out by this summer. So,
okay, so album number 13 will be Kick Judas Away from the Table.
Another favorite.
Da, 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 da. All right, everybody. Well, that's going to do it for another episode of the Planet Mullins podcast. Thanks again for watching and listening. My guest has been the amazing blues guitar player, vocalist, and philanthropist, Phil Gates. And we'll see everybody on the next one. Thanks, Phil. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, Rob. I appreciate you having me on. Bye-bye now.